Hey Rui, how's it going?
Hi, Rin. Hope with you as well.
Yeah, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Anytime I have a chance to dive into some, I'd say, more advanced topics and stuff, and especially with the APIs, always something of an exciting topic for me. So I appreciate you joining for sure today. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to nerd out about this stuff. So,
Yeah, I think my first introduction to it, my very first MVP conference way back in the day, I remember was Matt Allington working with you to basically create auto scaling for premium when auto scaling didn't exist. And you helped him out. I know some of the Power Automate codes back in the day.
yeah, I remember that. I think it was at MVP Summit. Yeah, using the
20,
that.
2018, 2019. I know I got nominated in 2018, so that would have been the like February of 2019 that happened. But yeah,
Yeah,
I remember Matt telling me. I remember Matt telling me about you though. It's like Rui's the individual who has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different platforms. You were very he had a lot of skill sets scattered across a lot of different software and tools and code. And he's the guy you go to if you want to figure out how to automate something. Rui's really good at automation.
yeah. I consider myself a little bit lazy, so try to automate the things that give me some work. But
There's
yeah,
a
so
go ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's a phrase around this. It's the if you want something done, give it to an employee. If you want something done efficiently, give it to a lazy employee.
Yeah. Certainly,
Yep.
certainly. Uh, Whenever I do something like 10 times repeating a pattern, I try to automate it if it's possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but whenever it's possible, it's definitely worth it. And the APIs, and not only the Power BI APIs, but Azure APIs, all of that. Uh, one of the one of the use cases is actually automate stuff,
hmm
not only admin operations. But yeah,
Exactly, and I think today we'll certainly be able to get through and see a lot of good use cases, not only for like um, I think some of the obvious ones, but I think some of the more unique scenarios as well to utilize these things. So looking forward to that. My favorite live streams are the ones for sure when I get to eat a little bit of popcorn and come out of the of the stream as well with a bit of new knowledge on some new use cases for that. Like last year, some of my favorite ones were anything with calc groups, where I learned a bunch of new ways to utilize those because they're such a diverse tool. And I'm sure I'll get a couple takeaways here today as well with APIs.
yeah, yeah. Call groups is definitely one of the hidden gems in Power BI. People try to think on calculation groups only for time intelligence and aggregations, but it's much more than that. You can even use it to be lazy. So one of my favorite use cases of calculation groups is transform a card. So if you put a measure
hmm
on a visual card, sometimes you want to show context for that measure. Say, for example, sales amount, but you want to
hmm
show the comparison between sales amount and last year. And you can use calculation groups to switch the value of the current measure and
hmm
by a text that will show you that will do the same period last year and you'll show the variation in a single visual. So you don't need
hmm
to. So if you want to do that, you need to use two measures. You need to put two visuals or
Yep.
three to show the variations. And you can do that with calculation groups because
Exactly.
it,
I remember coming across. I don't know if you wrote it or somebody else did, but I've for a long time I've used cards where I'll often create a measure that's a concatenated string where it'll usually be an actual, maybe a forward slash a variance, an arrow indicator of up or down. But you can create a
yeah,
calculation group that basically takes current measure, has a variable for a it basically does all that stuff with an output, and all you have to do is take any measure, filter to the calc
yeah,
group onto that, and boom, like you said, you immediately get that, and like okay, I think with any of those
yeah,
examples,
and
I
you
think it's just such a good way to be lazy with the and efficient with the model, just because you can reproduce this logic that otherwise would require a list of 500 measures. But I kind of think of three things in Power BI that Microsoft built to be so flexible that there will probably be a lot of ways that they didn't expect or necessarily want people to use them, and that's bookmarks, calculation groups, and now field parameters. Those are those things that are
Yeah.
so configurable that there's going to be 1,000 ways people will continue to use those. And I love Muhammad, who was on last month, who talked about like because bookmarks for their uses today has a very bad design interface. The output is fine for the end user, but it's not easy to develop with them. And it's like, well, it's because people use them for most of their not intended purposes. They were designed to filter, and people use them for pop-ups and all this other stuff. And we didn't really build them to do that. We just made them so customizable that people found creative ways to utilize these in the product.
Yeah, and visual fields, it's amazing. So actually, it can kill like 80% of the use cases of bookmarks. That's just to swap the a measure in a visual, or swap the field. That's you want to see by year or you want to see by
Yeah,
month. And
I mean, yeah,
and
exactly. That's
with field
yeah.
parameters, you can do it.
Yep, that was one of the most common reasons that I used bookmarks is to do kind of a visual swap where you had two cuts of a visual that couldn't quite be done with a measure because usually the axis or something needed to be changed, and field parameters let you do
Yeah,
that. And I used to have a bookmark that did a customer wanted a one-click hierarchy switch, so they had five visuals all with calendar hierarchy. They wanted to be able to click a button that switched everything from quarter to year to month, each all at the same time. And bookmarks did that. I can now do that with field parameters. So I considering how hard it is to develop bookmarks, every time a new feature comes out that removes the need to do bookmarking for something, I am happy for that because usually the new feature is better designed for that purpose. Mohammed even mentioned, I think, that they're long-term goals, so I'm going to guess that's at least 1 to 2 years out. But apparently, there will eventually be a dedicated way to link a button to the visibility of a visual without having to use bookmarks. The visibility, he's mentioning, is a long-term goal to provide some other interface that will be better than using bookmarks to toggle show and hide. So when that comes out, I think that will eventually lead to bookmarks being used for its one primary purpose, which is just simply a macro to apply multiple filters at once.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I try to avoid bookmarks as whatever I can. It's just because it's a lot of work
Oh, I
uh, to
agree.
to
Yeah.
to do it and to manage it.
Yeah.
Especially the thing that stressed me out is you build all of that in the bookmarks and then so we build all those interactions using bookmarks and then you start to think, hey, if I need to change something, I need to go and change all of these again, which is a lot of work.
100%. I'll make one final comment, and then I do want to bring it back to give yourself a little bit of a chance to introduce yourself. But the final thing that I'll just at least say on bookmarks is I have multiple reports where clients have asked for so many requirements for them, and a page has like 20 plus of them, and I've been very transparent. Like if I continue to build this, I probably can't hand this off to anyone in your organization to manage because I don't think they'll figure out how to. And they're like
Yeah,
insistent, nope, it'll be fine. That this person's an expert. They'll know what it is. I build it. I try to hand it off and like, actually, no, well, we need to keep you on retainer to manage this now because it's too complex. Like, I built it to your requirements though, and they're fine with it. But it's kind of like a golden handcuff. It's you're locked into having to be the owner of it now, just because it's beyond the scope of what I would say an average Power BI developer can manage, just because of how layered the bookmarks are with each other.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But like I said, I'd love to give a chance for you to introduce yourself a little bit for the people tuning in. You've heard that we've known each other for a few years, and he used to be an MVP before moving over to Microsoft. But yeah, why don't you share a little bit about yourself? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So I live in Portugal, for starters. So I'm working in data stack and always in Microsoft stack for the last 15 years. I started as a developer, went through all the stages of developer architecture. One of the reasons, for example, why Matt said that I have some background on development and multiple platforms was because 10 years ago, if you want to do, for example, mobile BI, you needed to write your own web application. There wasn't many solutions to do that. So I've done all of that stuff. The last 5 6 years, I managed an amazing team at DevScope. I also had the experience as a manager. And last year, I joined Microsoft and the amazing Power BI CAT team, where I'm having a blast working with the brightest minds in this industry. It's really an honor. I'm also a very community-driven person. I was an MVP for 5 years before joining Microsoft. I also co-founded a Power BI user group that it has a lot of it is growing a lot for the last year. So it's more than 3,500 members. We
Oh
do
wow.
meetups every month. It's a very engaging community. We need to to do a session for us as well. I will invite you. And I also do one of the things that I'm doing the most lately is open source work. So I will share a few repos that where I do contributions, especially around APIs, which is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and monitoring and governance. And yeah, so this is it about me.
Excellent. Yeah, and I would be happy to come on at some point for a meetup. I am still planning on going to Portugal. I almost decided to go. A friend was inviting me after the Next Steps conference for the weekend, but my general thing with traveling is anytime I visit a country for the first time, I want to spend at least a week there because if I don't come back for 5 to 10 years, I don't want to feel like I've missed out anything. So when I
Yeah.
do come, probably in the next year or two, I'll be making sure to hit Portugal, southern Spain, and I think I will go down to Casablanca as well.
Don't forget to visit the north of Portugal where I live and
Oh no, yeah,
give me a call.
I'll do the whole circuit in Portugal. I'll make sure to see everything, and then I'll be hitting you up to show me the best spots to go hang out at. So.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, as far as like some of the API stuff, where do you want to start the conversation today?
So, first of all, I think it's important to talk a little bit what are the APIs. I don't know if you are sharing my screen.
Yep,
Maybe
I
we
can do
can
that.
do
Now
that.
I am.
Okay. So I have a deck, but I prefer to put some content in a OneNote. So first of all, APIs. It's a set of REST APIs. So APIs in Power BI is a collection of REST APIs. You can call it within anything that can make a HTTP request, and they are mostly important for two type of users. So for admins, they are really important to administer, do administration tasks on your tenant, to monitor your tenant, to govern your tenant, to do security operations like assigning yourself or assigning someone else to a workspace, doing takeovers. And they are also really important for developers, because for developers, maybe not for managing, maybe to manage their own work, but for a Power BI developer, they can be really important to automate stuff. For example, if you spend some time publish every time you have 2-3 data sets, 2 PBIX files, and 5-10 Power BI PBIX that are live reports connecting to a data set, and you are publishing that manually, you can automate that task and do the publishing automatically by using a script. And you can do rebinding. That's one of my favorite developer APIs that allows you to rebind a report to a different data set. And without doing that on Power BI desktop, that will be a slow operation because you need to open the report. Sometimes it will give you an error, and then you need to publish it again. You can automate those kinds of operations using the APIs. And to find out about the APIs, you go to Microsoft Docs, REST API, Power BI, and all the APIs will be listed in here, and they will be grouped. So you have, I don't know why my Zoom is not working. Let me see what happened.
You do exactly what I do. Worst case, you do that.
Okay.
You search on the
Okay.
Windows screen to get it turned on.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go.
So all the APIs, they are grouped by the type of API. So if you are an admin, you will probably looking into this group of APIs, and then they are organized by artifact types. So you have APIs around apps, APIs around capacities, APIs around datasets, APIs around groups or workspaces. The reason it's called groups, because before Power BI before calling workspace, it was groups. But for legacy, it's still on the API, it's still called group. And then, for example, on groups, if you want to learn about APIs around groups, you can expand, and you will see, for example, this one. I have an API to add a user to a group. I have an API to create a group or a workspace to get the users and update the permissions on the workspace. This is something that also very useful, especially when you are dealing with large enterprise deployments. Instead of managing the permissions manually, going to the workspace and assigning the permissions, you can have an Excel spreadsheet or a database that define all of your security, and whenever you want to update, you just run a script and it will do everything for you. Believe me, on a large enterprise deployment, this can save you hours, and it can also bring you trust. Another thing about using the APIs and automating a certain task is not only it will save you time, it will also make the operation more trustable. Because believe me, you will get tired, you will make mistakes, but the code doesn't make mistakes. If it runs okay now, it will run okay tomorrow. Maybe there might be some API errors, but if it runs and if it gives you the okay, it's okay. And especially managing permissions, it's very normal to make some mistakes. I see that happen a lot. And whenever you want to, so let's say you are interested about the API. So let's say I wanna get all my workspaces that I have access. In this case, is the get groups. I can see in here the description of what the API does, the type of permissions that you need, the URL and the HTTP verb that you need to call. In this case, is the get, this is the URL you need to call. And some APIs have parameters. Other APIs, they don't have parameters. In this case, the get groups, you can specify a filter, for example, to filter groups that start with a certain character. You can also only, especially when you have a lot of workspaces, you can apply a top that will only return the first and results. And on the documentation, you can also see an example of the request, an example of the response that you will get from the API. So even before and using the API, this can be useful to understand if this API will be useful or not for you. And you have a ton of them. So one of my favorite ones, I really love this API. I think my head, it's always bubbling with ideas when I think about this API. It's the execute queries API. So it's an API at the dataset level. Execute queries in group. It's basically an API that allows you to execute the Dax query over a data set. It has some limitations, so you shouldn't think of this API to call like hundreds of times per second or per minute. It has some limitations. One of the limitations that we added this to the documentation this week, so you can only call it 120 times per user per minute. But it's I can do a demo of what you can do with this API, but things like data quality tests, integration with Power Automate, and bring all of that Power Platform integration, so you can have a Power Automate executing a query on the data set, and to do, for example, an alerting system whenever a specific measure goes over a certain amount, generate an email. I'm working with a colleague from the CAT team, and we are using I have a Power BI monitoring solution and building something with Power Automate and this API to do policy, to provide admins a policy control over their tenants. So doing things like, I have data marts enabled. Like today, you cannot enable data marts to a certain group of people, but you can use the activity API and to get everyone that is executing using data marts and have a policy, hey, is anyone using data marts other than these people, and report back to the admin, and the admin take some action and talk to those users and say, hey, you shouldn't use data mart. We don't have it, we don't authorize it yet.
And there's, I'll just mention too, is it is I think one of the coolest things to come out for sure, to be able to actually extract data out now, executing those DAX queries. And Stepan Razel was on my channel about 6 weeks ago and did a stream on that, basically the week after it came out as a launch feature. So it is an amazing new functionality tool for sure, and I think it adds a lot of power to the API. But for those listening, that drop the chat in the link that walks through that. But there's a good hours demo that actually goes through a lot of the capabilities of that as well.
The thing here is, this is not something new. So before the REST API, you could use the XMLA endpoint and some C# code to execute the queries. And honestly, actually, that is a very...
That required premium though, right? For the XMLA, you had a premium, but with the API, you can do can't you run the execute queries just against Pro?
Actually, I'm not sure. If you can.
I'm 80% sure. It's mentioned in the video, but I thought with the API that doesn't require a premium workspace to be able to use to execute queries with that. But obviously, the XMLA endpoint would require a premium workspace.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it requires a premium or not, honestly. But you also need to take into consideration some of the limitations of the execute queries API, and that is Kai. Last week, he wrote this blog post on comparing the two. So, and the takeaway here is, if you want to build something to scale XMLA endpoint, it is what you should do. If you want to if you want to execute a query and you don't want to execute it multiple times per second, or if you don't want to build a web application to expose data from a Power BI data set, and that web application can be used by thousands of users, REST API is not the way to go. But the thing about the REST API is, maybe, I'm not sure about that premium and shared capacity, but
sure.
The main thing for me is the flexibility it gives you. So because one thing is calling an XMLA endpoint, and you need to have some .NET code. Another thing is you just need to have a tool or a low-code solution that can make an HTTP request, because you can use a REST API on a Jupyter notebook. You can use a REST API on Power Automate. You can use a REST API whatever you want, and this can open and make the scenarios of usage of data that exists in the Power BI data set much more broader. So the interoperability that you can get with the REST API in this specific case, it is amazing. But if you, I wouldn't use this API for data integration scenarios, especially those. Let's say you have a Power BI data set, and you can easily have a Power BI data set with millions of rows. And you will use the REST API to extract those millions of rows every day or every hour. Don't do that, but because you will hit one of the limits. One of the limits is it can only return 1 billion values per query. But if you say, okay, I don't want to do data extraction. I want to do a snapshot of my sales KPI per store with a comparison with the value on the current month and the comparison to the previous year and the last 12 months average. That's the type of things that you can do, and it's very easy to build a Power Automate that will snapshot these values into a data lake just for snapshotting the value, because in Power BI, whenever you refresh and if the value changes, it changes. So you cannot it doesn't keep the history. And if you wanna do some snapshotting, then the API could be definitely useful.
Yeah, and to your comment of like it's maximum of 100,000 rows, million values, unique values in the frame. It's only 15 megs data per query, so it isn't super big. I do just want to double confirm. I checked the documentation, and like the article that you made at scale, basically like it's kind of a grow up story for basic data outputs at a smaller
Yeah,
scale. This does work
yeah,
with any version of a version 2 workspace that is pro or above. But the second you need to do enterprise type stuff, you're probably not going to want to rely on this versus the
yeah.
XMLA endpoint, which has the ability to scale up to a much larger capacity.
Definitely, definitely. And I've seen that in a few customers. So whenever things start to scale, you start to have a lot of users, a lot of
Yeah.
it's XML endpoint is the way to go, and other you need to care about other stuff like connection pooling it's not it will be more challenging. So REST
Mhm.
APIs, so definitely for the let's say easy stuff and things that are not going to be called like hundreds of times per second or per minute. But but you can do some very interesting. Another thing, for example, data quality. So you could build a Power Automate or a Logic app that will go to a data set and run some data quality tests on the data sets. Things like I wanna make sure that the count of stores is 100 because I only have 100 stores, and if it's not 100, maybe something happened in the this case upstream, right? Upstream in my upstream data source
Yeah.
or my ATL that didn't load the data to the data warehouse, and on my Power BI data set, I have the wrong I could have wrong numbers. So we can use this API for data quality, which is a very good use case also. So I don't know if there is any questions, so I can move on
There
and
was one
show stuff.
clarifying thing I just wanted to double check. So Rafael pointed out, and I'll reiterate, is that the these kind of connections for the execute queries does have to use the new version 2 workspaces. Are there still classic workspaces that exist, or has the auto migration happened yet? I know at one point there was that alert that Microsoft was going to automatically update any legacy workspaces after a certain date. I'm not sure if that ever if that's going to happen or has happened.
I think it happened, but
Yeah,
I'm not 100% sure.
yeah.
But I
At
think
some point, I thought,
it happened.
yeah, I thought it was like a year, maybe a year or two ago that they did an auto migration with an alert to customers that were basically going to upgrade all
Yeah,
legacy workspaces.
yeah.
There is a question actually that
Don't
I can pop up. Let me throw this here. Uh, from a what it would this work with the data set connected to Azure Analysis Services, but that's switched to direct query? So I'm assuming this is for the execute queries conversation.
can you repeat again? I was
Yeah, so
can you repeat the question?
what could you do an execute queries against a data set in Power BI? So basically, it's a data set in Power BI, and I'm assuming maybe a report in Power BI technically that's connected to an Azure Analysis Service model that's switched to direct query. I would assume no, because Power BI doesn't contain the
No,
data set anymore.
no. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm almost positive that it is listed on the limitations. Yeah, only data sets, new workspace, data sets that are hosted in Azure Analysis Services aren't supported.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, that's what I thought because I'm guessing the data has to be some type of an import or composite model that is kept in Power BI
yeah,
within the
yeah.
actual. Yeah. Okay. And oh yeah, here we go. One other one that I'll pop up to you since we're on a couple of questions. Excellent. Robin had one. I'll read it out since I don't think it's on your screen. So, any idea if access management revoke will be available anytime soon? Loving the endpoints and are using them extensively for automation.
Okay, access management revoke.
So it sounds like
Not
the
sure what
ability
that.
to use the API to revoke access from users using the API.
So one thing that you can do for groups and workspaces, you can delete and add a user as an admin. So I don't know if this can be considered as a revoke, but this is only for workspaces. You don't get the
Okay.
same thing for reports actually for the data set as well. I think
And
there
part of it, I guess
was
the curiosity
some.
is that that command is delete user as admin. I'm wondering because it sounds like that means you can add or delete a user from the workspace as an admin. For users that already exist in the workspace, I'm wondering if you're able to just change their permission level from viewer, reader, viewer, contributor, reader, admin.
I don't think so. You need to remove
Okay.
it and add it again.
Gotcha. Oh, interesting. Okay.
But you also have the same thing for the data set. So at the data set level, you can also change the permissions of the read and write, and the build permission. I don't think that is the same one for the reports. It's only data sets and workspaces.
Okay, but there's a different set of options in between the data sets and the the workspaces. Gotcha. Okay, cool.
And that's a typical admin operation. It's actually providing sometimes themselves access to the workspace to debug or to diagnose some issue. One thing that is really important, when you add yourself to the workspace and you remove, so just for the security and governance perspective, you can do that. So imagine that there is a workspace with data sets with salary data, and the company doesn't want to give access to anyone, just to the finance or the HR team. A Power BI admin can view that data if he adds himself to the workspace, but that information will be audited. So it's possible to someone to audit if anyone added themselves to a workspace and the distant list of users that access that workspace. So from the auditability perspective, no one can delete that audit operation of adding and removing themselves from a workspace or a data set, whatever.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, I'm loving learning some of these new. What would you call them? Would you call these commands or functions for some of the stuff that you can do with the API? I always confuse them between coding languages. The term to call the actions that you can do with the language.
I usually call them operations on the
operations,
API.
Okay.
So yeah, but you can. I'm sure that other people call it other names. So
exactly.
some endpoints or REST endpoints.
Yep.
Could be also a valid name. But you can see from this list that there are a ton of them. And certainly I don't have, sometimes, so for example, I only a few months ago discovered that there was an API to update the dataset permissions. Sometimes it just pop up in here, and it's important for you, especially if you are an admin, to have a frequent, let's say, to give a frequent look into what's new and what can help you on your day-to-day job. What I can tell you is this can make you way more productive, and it's definitely worth the investment. Even if you don't know how to write code, or if you don't know how to write code, you can use the APIs on Power Automate, that is a low-code solution, or you can ask someone help to build some scripts for you. But it's definitely worth.
Remind me, is there a I know with Power BI Embedded, they've done a good job of building those like demo sandbox environments where you can kind of like drag and drop code to see what it looks like when it renders. I can't recall. Is there any kind of environment for the APIs that kind of you basically lets you do a no-code, low-code build-out solution to show what outputs come out of it, or?
No.
Okay.
As far as I know, no. I can show what I usually do.
That would be great.
If I want to use an API. So the easiest way for you to use an API is my favorite one. But there is others. So if you are more into Python, there is also a Python library. If you are more into .NET, you can. There is also a .NET SDK. The one that I use the most is PowerShell, just because I'm more comfortable with it. So there is this PowerShell module called Microsoft Power BI Management, and using PowerShell, and everyone has PowerShell in their laptop. You just need to type this install module and the name of the module. just need to copy and paste this name over here. You run this, and this will install the module. I think I already have it installed, so I will skip it. And then this will give you access to a collection of commandlets. So commandlets in PowerShell, it's just a function that you can call. And one of them is the invoke Power BI REST method. And in here, let's say you want to get all the workspaces from that you have access to as a user. So get group. So this is probably the easiest API. So this is the URL we need to call. But because the commandlet already knows how to interact with the API, the only thing that you need is this last part over here. So the groups. So let's copy. Let's go to the PowerShell window and let's type it here, groups. It's URL, I believe, URL groups. So, oh, sorry. And another thing is the method. So the method is this first part over here. So the get, because this is a get operation. If it was an operation to make some changes, it will be probably a post or a put. In this case, it's a get. So you need to type that down, get, and you call it, and it will give you an error because the first thing that you need to do, and I made that on purpose, is you need to log in to your Power BI account, and you only need to do it once on the PowerShell session on a script. So, or in this case, I'm running a PowerShell session, so you need to call, and it gave you that warning. You need to call this login Power BI service account. So if I call it login Power BI service account, this will do something interesting. So this will pop up a window in my browser to do the authentication with my Power BI account. So if I do that, and let's go back to the PowerShell window, now it will tell me that I'm authenticated with my account on this tenant. I can also do the authentication with service principles. That's something that I will also like to spend like 2-3 minutes to demystify some things about the service principle. But doing the login, the normal thing that you want to do is you want to use the API as if with your account. So and if you want to do that, this is the way to go. Don't put credentials and usernames and password on the scripts. So do it like this. You can write a script that does some specific task, and the first thing you can do is log in, and it will do that pop-up window to ask for your authentication. And now, if I type that again, this will execute, and it will get me all the. Just do some format table. I don't know why it's not working, but okay. It just return, in this case, all the workspaces and the information about that workspaces that exist in my tenant. So the ID, the configuration of the workspace, if it is on dedicated capacity, what's the capacity ID, if it has a data flow storage or not, the type of the workspace, if it's V1, V2, or personal workspace or not. So this is how I usually do it. So if you just as a recap, so you need to install the module. You need to have PowerShell. So you will have PowerShell on if it is a Windows laptop, and then authenticate. So using the login command, and then you can call the invoke Power BI REST method on any API. So let's try it with another one, just as an example. So if I call it, for example, let's say I want to get the data sets. So that is an API called get data sets in group. Now this one is a little bit different because it's groups. It's the group ID and the data sets. So if I want to get information about the data sets, I need to provide the workspace ID. But it's exactly the same thing. So instead of being groups, I need to put here a workspace ID. Let's go into this workspace. And what's the workspace ID? So if you open a workspace in Power BI, the workspace ID is this grid over here, this ID. So let's copy and go back to PowerShell, paste it, and slash datasets. And now this will return information about the datasets in that workspace. So it will.
Excellent.
It's returning a JSON value with information about the dataset. In here, it's a ton more information. So if it is binded to the gateway, the user's configurations for each dataset, the user permissions. So you get the idea. So it's basically for me, it's the quickest way to just try an API with the data from your tenant.
Quick follow-up question, just from Donald, that you can clarify. So he wants to know that and confirm that a normal user versus a Power BI admin can execute these APIs, so these queries.
Yes, certainly. So if you are a normal user, in here I'm executing the API. I'm a Power BI admin, but I'm executing the API with my user because I'm not using an admin API. So I'm getting groups, data sets from this group, but I need to add to the works.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, looks like Rui just froze. So let's see if I can get this.
The APIs that are below here.
Okay, good. Yeah, you froze for like 2 to 3 seconds. So good, you're back. I was just about to ping you on Skype.
Okay.
You're all good now. All right.
Okay, so all the API. If you are not an admin, you can execute all the APIs that are not under this admin space over here. So all of these APIs you can execute it as a regular user. Now the thing is, you will only see what you are authorized to see. So if you call the groups API or the get workspaces API, it will get you the workspaces you have access to, not all the workspaces. But if you are an admin, you can call this admin APIs, and the admin API that is this get groups as admin, that it's almost the same of the other one. So get groups as admin. This is the one that I want, but with a big difference. So instead of starting with groups, the admin APIs, they start with admin. And the admin APIs, you need to be an admin. So to call anything that starts with admin, you need to be a Power BI administrator, or you need to have a service principal with permissions to call the admin APIs. In this case, in read-only mode. But you don't need to be a Power BI admin to use the APIs. That's why I say that as a Power BI developer, the APIs can still be very useful to automate some of your tasks.
Yeah, like we've just talked about the goal with any of this stuff is automation, right? You want to save yourself from any of the repetitive tasks of the desk monkey.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so I already showed you how to call the APIs. So one of the methods is using the PowerShell module. It's my favorite one. I also know if you are more into .NET, probably you can use the C# SDK and also call the API from there. So, but everything that can make an HTTP request can call an API. Other thing that is important to discuss about the APIs is the limits, and especially the admin APIs. Let's say this get groups API, get groups as an admin. It's a very useful API that will list you. It will get information. It will get workspaces as an admin. So in here, it will list all the workspaces, even the ones that you don't have access to, or you are not assigned in there. But one of the limitations of this API, and it's really, really important to take this into consideration when building some script, is you can only call this API 50 times per hour. If you call it more than 50 times per hour, you will get throttled. So the API will return with a 429 error, and probably it will force you to wait before.
Well, there we go again. Interesting. It's freezing just a little bit. All right, let's see if it kicks back in for Rui now.
Up to 5,000.
There you go. Yeah, it hiccuped for just a quick second. So
You
maybe
can-
just repeat the last three sentences that you said.
Okay, I was saying that the limitations, one of the limitations of this API is you can only call it 50 times per hour, but you can use this API to get 5,000 workspaces per request.
Okay.
So if you wanna, so doing the math, so you can only return without throttling 50 plus multiplied by 5,000 workspaces per request. So if you have a really large tenant, you'll probably hit throttling, but you can wait for 1 hour and then resume after that, after the throttling.
Excellent. Okay. So there's at least a window that it will reduce the speeds and throttle it, but after an hour it resets. So that's good to know.
Yeah. But the thing is, every time you are going to use an API, if there is this limitations paragraph in here or section, read the limitations, understand what they do, and basically take them into consideration. We have been talking about the execute queries API. That this is one of the APIs that have a lot of limitations in here, and you need to take those into consideration. You won't be able to return more than 1 million. You won't be able to call it more than 120 times per minute. But it's important to read them and take them into consideration in what you want to build. Otherwise, you'll get surprised after developing the code, and that's not nice for sure.
Exactly. No, good to know. I mean, I think both the art of possible, but also the ceilings or limitations, as you mentioned, that you can hit are good to know to prevent that happening before that hits production, and then it screws up the production line in some way. So.
Yeah. And since we are talking about this API, let me show you a quick demo of what you can do with this.
Excellent.
One of my favorite use cases. So I will show you Power Automate. So Power Automate is a low-code tool. Why is it not showing me that? Okay, I have this Power Automate here called PBI set Dax query and email. And this Power Automate, it's using the Dax, the execute queries API. That today you don't need to do it like this. You have a much easier solution, but that is using a connector called execute queries from Power BI. Okay, there it is. Finding it, but there is right now there is a connector called execute queries that you can call. You don't need to call the API, but if you want to do something, so it's run a query against a data set, you just need to select the data set and the workspace and the DAX and write the DAX statement in here. But before this connector got released, there was only the Dax API, the HTTP API, and this is an example of one of the things that you can do. So the idea is I'm running this every day. I have a Dax query that will compare, it will get the sales for each employee, and every time or every day that an employee is selling less than last year, so it's underperforming, I send an email to the manager with all the employees, with a list of all the that are underperforming. that data sets, the data set ID that you want to do the query and the execute queries API. You parse the body, so that the repo.
Sorry guys, it looks like the internet's hiccuping a little bit.
And I should have on my email. So something like this. So this is one example of how you can use that API with Power Automate or whatever tool you want to run some DAX queries over the data sets, and in the end send an email, like an alerting system to other users, and this is one of the use cases. But you can do, for example, for data quality, and just do a data quality check on your data set. So this is an example of how that API can be really useful. How are we on time?
We're good on time. I was just mentioning to the channel, there's internet is being a little glitchy at the moment, so there's every once in a while it was pausing and buffering, but I think we're back to good again. We have about another, I'd say 10 or 15 minutes that we can go through a few other demos. So
okay, another thing I want to mention is so sometimes you are a developer and you want to try the APIs, and you want to try the service principles, and you want to try the admin operations, but you are not an admin. So you don't have the admin permissions on your tenant, on your company tenant. A way that you can be an admin is you can create your own tenant, and there is this program called Microsoft 365 Developer. I can share the link, and you just need to join the Microsoft 365 Developer program, and this will give you a tenant. So this will you will be able to create a tenant with 20 or 25 E5 licenses. So you get Power BI, Power Automate, you get the entire thing. So you'll be the admin, you will be the global admin of that tenant. So you'll be able to create whatever you want in it. And this is not a trial. So this is something that if you use for development purposes, and believe me, they do monitor that if you are using this for development purposes, or you are using it to actually do some work or production work. But if you use it for development purposes, this will be renewable every 90 days. So this is a really nice way for you to have your own tenant, where you will be an admin. You can try all those admin knobs, and you can turn whatever you want. You can call the admin operations. You can build your solution using this sandbox that will give you the pro licenses for free, and it's definitely something that if you don't have it, and you are not an admin and you want to try those stuff, look at this. This is very useful.
Excellent. Yeah, like as I was kind of talking about it a little bit earlier, is anytime there's any kind of a sandbox environment to play around with, I think that that makes it a lot easier for exploration and discovery for sure.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I want to talk is service principles. So whenever, let's say, if you want to build a script, show you. If you want to build a script like, let's say, example, I want to get all my data sets. So let's just check if this is running. It is. So I have this simple script over here that is connecting. So I'm logging in with my account, and I'm calling the admin datasets. It's an API that will return all the datasets that exist in the tenant. But every time I run this is going to pop up for my authentication. Now, if you want to build a script that is unattended, so a script that will run without asking for the authentication, for example, a script using one of my So whenever you do a schedule refresh on a data set, it will refresh all the tables and all the partitions inside of that data set. But using the Nsl Refresh API, you can specify the tables that you want to refresh. You can specify the partitions you want to refresh if you have incremental refresh turned on, for example. It's and this works in Pro and Premium. So if you want to refresh a single table in a shared in a Pro workspace, this is the only way you can do it because you don't have the XMLA endpoint. So this Nsl Refresh API, it's a very useful API to automate the refresh of a data set without using the schedule refresh. You might be using this API after your ETL workload or after a certain operation, and you want to make sure that okay, my data is ready to refresh, and now I want to refresh my data set. So this type of API, you don't want it to be running and asking for the credentials, because this will be running on the server. It will be running on something that will that won't have someone going there and I want to talk about this because I usually see people going wild on the creation of those service principles. They create a service principle, things doesn't work, and they go wild and they give all the permissions until it works. And I will tell you exactly what you need to do whenever you want to use a service principle and what type of permissions you need to give it on your Power BI tenant. And I think I can do it.
Intelligent refreshes, I think, are a great feature for sure. Like you said, there's often dependencies that you have to do those, and through the API, and there's also some stuff in Power Automate which allows for just being able to intelligently determine when something is refreshed to kick off something else, which from the native Power BI interface doesn't really give you nearly that flexibility.
Yeah. So the Nsl Refresh API, it's an awesome API. There is a ton of advantages in going into that path. Of course, it's a more advanced way, but you can cancel the refresh. That's another big advantage. So if you are triggering your refreshes using the Nsl Refresh API, that will give you a refresh ID that you can cancel it. If it's running for 2 hours, you can go and cancel it. You can do batch and transactional commits. A batch is transactional is you want to refresh all the keep the data on the others, and I want to roll back everything.
Yep.
You have parameters for automatic retries. So you have you can apply this retry count. If something fails, you can say, okay, try 5 times. And another really important parameter you get from the Nsl Refresh API is the max parallelism, and this can be used to increase the performance. So imagine you have a data set with 30 tables. You can put the max parallelism up to, I believe it's up to 30 or 20. So this will, by default, I think it's 6. I'm not sure, but you can increase the parallelism of the refresh. So it will, if you put 10, it will refresh 10 tables at a time or 10 partitions at a time.
Okay.
But so this can be used to increase the performance, but this can also be used, and this is also a very common use case, to protect your data source. Because for a very let's say a very busy data source or database, having 6 queries or 6 expensive queries running at the same time can maybe kill the database, or because there are other workloads refreshing, or there are multiple data sets refreshing at the same time. So using the max parallelism and the Nsl Refresh API, you can say, okay, I want to refresh my data set. I don't care if it's going to take a few minutes or even an hour, but I want to make sure that even if I have 20 tables, I won't be eating the database more than 2 queries at a time. So think as the max parallelism as a way to increase the performance, but it will also increase the the demands on the data source, but also to protect your data source, especially if you are, for example, using a database with that doesn't allow too many active connections at the same time. So you might want to protect your data source using this pattern.
I have one question that I wanted to pop up as well. So is there a course or anything or documentation, a place like that you'd recommend to kind of get up to speed with service principals, keys, key vaults, everything kind of related to a lot of these things?
So on the docs, I'm sure that is. I'm not sure if I have any link in here, but I'm sure there is some documentation about the service principles on the docs. I can share that later.
Yeah, share that with me, and I'll make sure to update the video description for it. And everything you've been showing, I've been trying to pop those links into the chat as well.
Yeah, but I remember, and I know that is some doc with, I think is this one, use Power BI with service principles. So there is this blog post, and in here there is certainly a reference to the docs. Should be this one that walks you through the what you need to do to create a service principal. But let me do it, and I will show you what you need to do to use a service principal with the APIs and in less than 5 minutes.
That'd be great. Yep. And I just threw a couple of the links of what you just showed. So I have a few things for the people to check out.
So first thing you need to do is you need to go to your Azure portal. So portal.azure.com. Mm-hmm. You go to the Azure Active Directory, and in here you will find something called app registrations. So you click on app registration and click on new and give it a name, read service principal. And that's it for this purpose. So if your purpose is to create a service principal to use on a PowerShell script, okay. And you should take a note of the following: the application client ID and the directory tenant ID. So let's copy this into my notepad. So app ID or the service principal ID and the tenant ID, and they give all sorts of permissions. You don't need to do it. This will make things insecure, so you don't need to do it. If you just want to call the API using the service principal, so if you want to use Power BI embedded, maybe you will need to do it. But if that's not the case, if the only thing that you want to do is call an API using the service principal, you don't need to give any kind of API permissions. You can leave it by default. You don't need to do anything else. So with that saved, let's go. I have a script over here called, okay, Microsoft Power BI Management, and let's paste those values here. App ID, and there is only one step missing, but I will get there in a minute.
Excellent. Okay.
And the secret, here it is. Now the difference is when you have a service principal, instead of calling the connect Power BI service account that will pop up for the authentication prompt, you call the connect Power BI service account with a switch parameter called service principal. You provide the tenant ID and you provide a credential that it's basically the app ID and the secret in an object called in a PS credential object. And with that, let's call it, the authentication is that. Okay? I was able to authenticate using that service principal. Now let's try to call the API. Let's try to call the groups API with that service principal, and this will give me an error. And the error is unauthorized. This is normally where non-informed user will go crazy. Unauthorized. I cannot call the API, the service principal. Then enable the authorization is given not in the service principal, but for that to get that authorization, you need to be a Power BI admin. So you need to go to your Power BI portal. You need to be a Power BI admin to give that permission. So you may be using a service principal without being a Power BI admin, but to give that permission to the service principal, you need to be a Power BI admin. So you go to admin portal, tenant settings, and in here there will be an API called a tenant setting called allow service principals to use the Power BI APIs. This one, and in here you need to have you need to create or reuse a security group where that service principal is inside it. So I already have a security group called PBI settings service principals. By the way, this is one of the best practice I also do. So is whenever I change or I wanna trim down the security on a tenant setting, I always create a security group. In this case, it's PBI settings service principals. If I go to, let's say, create workspaces, I have the PBI settings workspace created. So I try to avoid using the same group for everything, because this might lead into also an insecure Power BI tenant. So Power BI setting service principals, it's a security group I already have. If I didn't have a security group, I would need to create one. So a security group is just an Azure Active Directory group. Let's search for Power BI settings service principals. And if I add that service principal I created, it's a service principal. Now I should be good to go. If I call this again, sometimes this takes a minute or a second. It's still failing, but maybe I need to call it again. Still giving the unauthorized. So this normally takes a minute. Oh, no, it's working.
There we go. Okay. So I said to catch up.
I no longer get the unauthorized, but I don't get any groups because that service principal is not a member of any group. Now, if I go to my Power BI portal and let's say to this workspace, pick one with big data. So this workspace, and I give access to that service principal. And let's try again. There it is.
Excellent.
So now I got, so that service principal is a member of that workspace. It's authorized to call the API by the Power BI admin, and it will just work. So, and it will get, I'm calling the groups API, so I get all the groups that my service principal has access to. So you don't need to go to those web API permissions and else. So just as a recap, we created the service principal. We didn't change any configuration of the service principal. Everything is by default. And the last operation is using that tenant setting, the service principal, allow service principal to call the Power BI APIs, and we make sure that the service principal is inside of one of these security groups. You could, of course, as an admin, enable this for the entire organization, and that extra step won't be needed. But my recommendation is, especially for this setting, is use have a security group and don't allow every service principal to use the Power BI API. This is also a best practice to protect your Power BI tenant from any service principal to have permission to call the API.
And I think in general, when giving permissions, access, or anything else, outside of maybe admins, any other organization of that, it's almost like usually the rule of thumb is to use some type of a security group or office group or something to be applying for these, because it reduces the overhead, right? You know, now the office your O365 admin can manage those from their end rather than having to continually update the portal. So great recommendation.
Yeah, another tenant setting also related to service principals is this one. It allows service principals to use read-only admin APIs. And this one is it's to allow a service principal to be an admin in read-only. So the service principal will be able to use admin APIs as an admin. They won't be able to change anything because it's only read-only. And for this, I created another security group, not use the same, because otherwise, if I use the same, all the service principals will have rights to call the admin APIs, and you don't want to do that because this is a much more restrictive permission. I created another one, Power BI settings, service principals, admin. So every service principal that is in here can call those admin APIs. A very common use case is using service principals to get monitoring data. So get the scanning all your Power BI tenant and get all the workspaces, all the data sets, all the configurations, and also the activity. So what's happening on your tenant. And this is a very, very common use case of service principals as an admin that is writing a script or a Power Automate or a data factory that will go through these APIs and extract the audit log from Power BI or scan the whole tenant for monitoring purposes.
What I'm hoping moving forward is that the some of the integrated administrative reports and tools and everything in Power BI will start to leverage those a bit more, because it's like I've seen people build out some really nice monitoring solutions for sure on activity and usage and all that other stuff, but it does take some time and love. So I think app source type reports, things like that built by Microsoft would be nice to see going forward, where people can plug and play it.
Yeah, there are a few things out of the box, like the capacity metrics app, the usage metrics inside of the workspace. But to be fair and honest, it's not enough. We do have a backlog and a roadmap to provide all this information to admins without requiring any effort. So it's a feature called admin monitoring. But until then, if you are a Power BI admin in a large organization and you need to monitor your tenants and you need to know what's happening on your tenant, you need to rely on these APIs, and you have two options. So option number one is you can write your own solution, or you can reuse one of the many open source solutions. I'm showing this. This is one that I built. I call Power BI Monitor, but there are many others. So I know that just Lindbeck, I don't know how to pronounce his name, from Denmark, he built one using Azure Data Factory. So mine is using PowerShell, and you can deploy this in the Azure function that will store this data in a blob storage. And in the end, you get a comprehensive Power BI report to monitor your tenant. But you are right, you need to deploy this on your Azure subscription or your virtual machine if you want to run locally. It will give you some work, and you need to manage it and support this. But honestly, it is something that is very, very important to do, even if you need to do it by yourself. So if you have the skills, or you have someone in the team that can call these APIs and store this data, do it, because it will be worth it. In the end, you will get the history of usage of your tenant, what's happening, and this will also allow you to get a much better priority into what's happening, because maybe you are supporting a data set or a workspace with tons of reports that no one uses, and every time you do you want to do some change, you are going there and making sure that report is still up with the latest layouts, but no one is using that report for more than a year. And of course, making sure that you give attention to the right users on your organization. Maybe there is a user that is using Power BI every day. He has a ton of good user stories, and you don't know him because he's in another country, and but he's maybe the guy that is building the most amazing stuff, and everyone loves what he builds.
Exactly.
So
And
looking at this data can make you shift your priorities. So it's definitely worth to look at.
but I think too, it can also like, I mean, one final takeaway from that is Power BI does automatically turn off refreshes for data sets that don't get used after. What do you know the time limit for that? Is it like 30 days?
I
No, maybe a
think
little
so.
longer than that. It's at like 30 or 60 days. But you can
30 or
create your own.
60, yeah.
Yeah, you can trigger your own instances with this. You can basically do usage tracking, and maybe you actually care to know about that after 15 days. If a report has not been accessed for 15 days, you can create data off of that to create an alert to probably using metrics or something to help you get better telemetry into when you should take action against usage or anything related to those. So a great examples that you
Yeah.
showed.
So another thing that I want to share. So on my GitHub, that is, I have a repo called PBI scripts. Please share it on the chat. So this is a repo. It's like a playground for me. So whenever I'm working with a customer or a colleague, and they ask me something that I know that I can solve with API, I usually, instead of sending the script, I usually publish it here on this repo, and I have a ton of them. I will show one that is related to the monitoring. So that solution that I showed, the PBI monitor, it's a more comprehensive solution. You need to deploy it, but of course it will handle all of that throttling. It will scale. I can tell you that it works with a workspace with a tenant with 100 workspaces or 100,000. But a lot of code is in there, and it's complex. But let's imagine that you just want to scan your tenant. You just want to, okay, I want to know what exists in my tenant. I want to get this into a file and build my own Power BI report. So I have a sample here, workspace scan, that have a few parameters. You can see that this is 200 lines of code. It's not nothing. It's not something very, very complex, and most of the code is actually handling the 429 error, that limitation on when you get throttled.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you right away that if you have a tenant with more than 50k workspaces, you will get throttled. Less than 50k workspaces, you can use the scan API and you won't get throttled. So the script it's basically so it has a few parameters of what you want to return. If you want to return the Dax measures, or if you just want to get the workspaces and the data sets and the content of each workspace. And when you run this, in the end, I can actually try to run it. See. So my tenant, it's not a really large tenant. It has like 200 workspaces. But look at the speed that this script runs. Using one of the most used APIs, it's the scanner APIs. So this script is going to scan my whole tenant, extracting for each data set all the DAX measures. So it just fetch 117 workspaces, and it's run in less than 20 seconds. And in the end, I have a JSON file in here with a scan with the information of the entire tenant. Of course, if you have a huge tenant with like 10,000 or 100,000 workspaces, this will take a while, but it won't take hours. Especially if you go under the 50,000 workspaces, this will run in a matter of minutes, and it will scan the whole tenant. So you will get the information for each workspace, all the reports, the sensitivity labels, who modify it, who publish it, that report or data set, the measures, the DAX measures, so the DAX code of every measure of every data set on the tenant. So you can get a lot of value from this data. So you can enforce naming conventions, for example. You might have you have a large team of Power BI developers, or you open self-service and you give trainings to people to give proper names to and follow a naming convention. And you can have a script that will scan the tenant every day. And if you found and you write some regular expressions over this JSON file. And if you found that there are measures not following your naming convention, you can pop up an alert and send the guidelines again to that developer. One more time, automate. Okay, so many things that you can do with this. You can even get the Power Query code with the scanner APIs. So scanner APIs definitely worth a look.
I think though, yeah. I mean, there's so many possibilities for that. I mean, as far as even just like some of the app source stuff and template apps, the ability to make things like these that can plug and play in and let users pull in data into their tenants with you know, out of the box reports that can just connect. I think there's a lot of possibilities for people to build out stuff that can be shared and distributed to other people. So
yeah, and I have a ton of things to show you. I could be here for 2 hours just going through all the script. Let me just. I will say,
let's do one more thing, and then we do need to wrap up. Yeah.
Let me show you another of my favorite ones. Is the export API. So the export API is it's this API over here. So export file in group. This works with paginated reports and Power BI reports. So it is an API that you need to reference a report. So you need to specify the workspace of that report and the ID of that report. And in the body, you can specify some configurations like okay, what's the pages that you wanna export? What's the identity that you wanna use? So you can call the export API with a service principal or a Power BI user that is an admin on the workspace, and you can run that report using other identity and get the report as if it was of the user. You can specify the pages, you can specify the filters. So this can be used like data-driven subscription. So this API, and it's also important to look into the limitations. So you have a few limitations considering the premium capacity that you are using. So there is a table over here that will tell you. So if you are on a P1, you can only execute 55 pages per in parallel. So it's important to take this into consideration. But this API allows you to do, and it's a very simple API to use. So I have the script. It's on my repo. I export Power BI report. So the script has as a parameter the workspace ID and the report ID and the format or the output format that I want. So you have a PDF and you have a PowerPoint for Power BI reports. But if this is a paginated report, you have Excel, CSV, and all the others. And the script, it's 55 lines of code. So the idea is calling that export to API and waiting, because this is an asynchronous API. So it's an API that will execute immediately, and then it will give you an ID, and then you have another API to check the status of that ID, and when it's succeeded, you can get the result. Now, let's run this. All my scripts, they ask for the authentication, and this just started the export of this report over here on a workspace. Sometimes the performance is, the first request can take a while, but after you make the first request, especially for a report and a data set, the subsequent will be much faster. So in the end, here it is, export successful. Let me just show it. So I should have on my output folder, here it is. So I have a PDF with the last timestamp with my Power BI report export as a PDF. So you can think of this API to use with scripts or Power Automate and build your own data-driven subscriptions. And of course, that you need to have premium to use this API, but it's a really useful API, and I'm sure that it can unblock a ton of scenarios. Data-driven, snapshotting reports, that's another very useful use case. I just want to snapshot my report every single day because I want to see that report, how it was last year.
Exactly.
All the numbers.
Yeah. I think like I love the snapshot up, but to be able to basically do the export as PDF, that's super useful. And I mean, I know weren't you involved in that that website that lets you do that, the Power BI robot, or what was it?
I was.
Okay, yeah, I was like, I'm connecting the dots, but I remember, yeah, I thought you helped build that or something, but it's the website that does the automatic basically exporting email before that even was a thing in Power BI in any capacity.
Yeah. This one is so the Power BI robots. It's a much more comprehensive solution. And this is, let's say, something that you want to do specifically for a report, and you want to control everything. Because using the API, the advantage that it gives you is you can control whatever you want. So you can export as a PDF or an image, and you can build you can save that image, and you can build an email, and you can store it in a data lake. But we need to write all that code to do that. But the robots was before this API. So the API basically make this operation a lot more easier.
I'll have just a comment I wanted to throw up from. Here it is. Yeah, I can throw that up there. He's mentioning auto snapshotting of report and or measure values as every business uses Dream. So very useful thing that you showed right there to kind of, I think, wrap up the demos for the day. But that was fantastic. Let me.
And Rafal, just one thing. If you want to snapshot the measures, I wouldn't use the export Power BI report. I would use the execute queries API, because if the goal is I want to snapshot my measured values every day, you just need to write the Dax query and store that result in a data lake or a database. So you don't need to export the report to do that.
Excellent, good to know. But yeah, Rui, this has been super great and informative. Like I said, I've learned quite a bit today, and it's always nice to see the flexibility of and the sheer amount of operations that you can do to fetch nearly anything from the administration and management perspective, automation of exports, or even down to the data level of specific entities of data that can be extracted from the report. So at the level and the capacity that the API has today, basically can get almost any data that you might need for any type of use cases out of the Power BI tenant. So it's a great tool for sure.
Yeah, it was. Thank you it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Just as a recap, avoid for everyone. So whenever you are doing some repetitive work in Power BI regarding operational stuff like publishing, rebinding, there is probably an API to do it. And it's very useful to have your own collection of reusable scripts. I can tell you from experience, this can be a great productivity boost.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. I'm sure, and I would definitely love to have you back on at some point in the future to dig into this again. As you mentioned, you can talk about these things for hours. There's so many different things to show. So I think this was a great broad coverage of the topic. But yeah, thanks for joining on your Friday evening, and I hope you also enjoy the rest of your weekend as well.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships as well. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on social media to help pass on this awesome content and to help the channel grow. So until next time.